Okay, hi everyone. Good morning. So we have a very exciting class today. We are hosting Judge Victoria Kolakowski with us. Just to give the background to the judge, and then I will introduce the judge and acknowledge our partners in the embassy and in the U.S. State Department. So this class is taught in English. It is taught in Israel, but it is taught in English, the entire class. So students in Israel need to take, guys, you take 2 classes or 3 classes? Just 1 class. So this is the 1 class in English that they're taking. This is just perfect because the topic of the class is civil rights and civil liberties in America. And I think we couldn't hope for a better guest speaker. I would like to acknowledge our partners, so the U.S. Embassy in Israel and the U.S. Department of State, the Office of U.S. Speakers, and the Center for the Study of the United States with the Fulbright program here at the university. Without those partners, this event, as well as various other events, would not have been possible. So it's a pleasure to work with you guys, Eitan and Nilofar and everyone else. So thanks a lot. And our guest for today is Judge Victoria Kolakowski. She became the first openly transgender trial court judge of general jurisdiction when she was elected in Alameda County, California in 2010. Before becoming a trial court judge, she was an attorney for 21 years in Louisiana and California, serving as a sole practitioner attorney in a small patent boutique firm, a patent and licensing counsel for a publicly traded company, patent and general counsel of a second publicly traded company, a senior government utility regulatory attorney, and an administrative law judge for 2 different California agencies. She is passionate about ensuring and expanding access to justice, particularly for those with limited resources. She serves on the Judicial Council of California's Advisory Committee on Providing Access and Fairness, and is the California Council of Churches appointee to the California Access to Justice Commission. Judge Kolakowski is a former president of the International Association of LGBTQ+ judges from 2015 to 2017, and she has spoken widely on LGBT issues, especially transgender legal issues, to audiences around the world. She is leading educator for the judiciary on transgender issues and is an adjunct professor of law at the University of San Francisco School of Law. She is especially proud to have been honored as a pioneer in the law by the California Women Lawyers in 2014, and to have been named the 2019 California Legislative Women's Caucus's Women of the Year, 18th Assembly District. Judge Victoria, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us today. And just as another testament to the passion of the judge, for us, it's pretty comfortable. It's 9:15. We have our coffee, but for the judge, it's almost midnight, and it's probably going to be after midnight by the time we finish. So we especially appreciate the fact that you are here with us today. And maybe I will let you open with a few opening remarks, and then we can move to questions that I prepared and questions that the students might have prepared, if that's okay.
That would be great. Thank you. And it's a real honor to be here. Should we? I don't know. Do we need any additional introduction from the fine folk at the with the United States Embassy who've assisted in getting me here, or I don't know if there's anything else needs to be said.
Eitan, are we okay, or is there anything else? Anybody else needs to?
Oh, we're good. Thank you, Professor, and thank you for the kind acknowledgement. It's a pleasure always to work with Tel Aviv University. The Center for the Study of the United States, in partnership with Fulbright, is a key partner of ours in sharing information about U.S. institutions, law, government, and society. So thanks again.
Okay, kind of like here's a word from our sponsor, but anyway. So I'm really honored to be with you. I'm looking forward to our discussion this morning. For you, for me, it's going to be morning soon. Just really early morning for me, and so I want to just briefly say, in terms of, as Alameda County, California, you may wonder where in the world is Alameda County, California. If you know where San Francisco is, across the San Francisco Bay, there's Oakland and Berkeley. I am sitting right now in the city of Oakland, actually at home. This is a virtual background. I'm not doing this from like work. And so just to give you an idea, Alameda County is a county with about 1.7, 1.8 million people. And I am currently in an assignment where, among other things I've done over the years, I'm currently in charge of our housing court in terms of evictions and things like that, as well as handle all the small claims appeals in the county, as well as a number of other interesting issues. But over the years, I've done a variety of assignments in both the criminal and the civil area, even a little bit of family law. And so I've been on the bench now for 11 years or so. And I'm just wondering, am I the only person who hears like the thing that sounds like a doorbell? Okay, I just want to make sure.
More people are joining, but that's
okay. I just want to make sure that I want to make sure I'm not hearing things. And so the other thing, you can tell I'm really, really very staid and conservative about anyway. And I wish I could greet you in Hebrew. I would have about like many years ago. I believe it or not, I studied Hebrew once upon a time. That's a very long story that you don't need to hear. But and I was terrible at it. And so, I'm glad to be here speaking to you in English today. So I believe, though, that the professor has some questions and some topics that we can talk about. And I think that that's going to spring a whole interesting conversation.
fantastic. So thank you, Judge. So let's jump right in. So the first thing is that President Trump, right before leaving office, appointed the third justice to the Supreme Court. So after appointing two conservative justices, he appointed a third one. The first two ones replaced more or less conservative justices, so the impact on the ideological balance on the court wasn't that substantial. But given the fact that Amy Coney Barrett replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the effect on of the new appointment or the new composition of the court on the rights of LGBTIQ people in America, abortion rights, and maybe more generally just civil rights and liberties in America may be substantial. So what is your view on this? You have a lot of experience both as a judge and as an advocate on those topics. So it would be very interesting, especially given the case that, tenure on the court is justices on the court that have life tenure, and the three justices that Trump appointed are young. Yeah. So they're going to be there for several decades probably.
Yeah, and so just I'm going to give the little disclaimer because I'm sort of the queen of the caveats. Nothing I'm saying is my personal opinion. I can't opine about pending cases or controversies. That's not what I'm going to talk about. I will talk about some general themes and point to some things that are going on in our court system here. There are two areas, ways in which the court's new supermajority makes a difference in these kind of topics. One of them, I'm going to start off with one briefly, although it may be the most important, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the other one at a greater depth. And that is that there are more justices who are on the court right now who are open to the idea of revisiting established precedent than there have been in the past. In general, our courts work in very deliberate, slow manner. And when a decision's made, the court doesn't just usually come back the next year or two and say, oops, we made a decision, made a mistake, sorry, we're gonna do something else, because it would undermine, I guess, trust in the legitimacy of the institution. It makes it hard for people to rely upon the decisions of a court if it's constantly changing its mind. And society, to some extent, I think, relies upon a certain amount of stability. One of the challenges that any court has to deal with is trying to figure out the balance between how much do you depart from the past because you think that there have been mistakes made in the past, or you think the circumstances may have changed, and how much you want to maintain stability of the system. Because if you come in because what you don't want is for it to seem like it's a political body where you have somebody gets appointed, and then it's like a legislature that's going to come in and completely change the laws. I think that it's a fundamental precept of our legal system that the law is something more solid and stable. And in that sense, it's a conservative institution in that big leaping changes don't happen usually overnight. These things develop and take time. And I think this court is more willing than perhaps some previous courts to be able to look back and say, we got it wrong, let's change that, in ways that might not have been thought about even 4 or 5 years ago. But turning to the substantive part of that, about what the way that the court's looking at things, one of the challenges that our legal system faces, and which our society faces, is in a pluralistic society, how do you handle differences of opinion and differences when in terms of how you want to express yourself? In the United States, our Bill of Rights begins with the First Amendment contains both the right to free speech as well as the right to freedom of practicing and expression of religion. And so this is a fundamental concept in the United States from its founding, that religious expression is something that needs to be respected. And as a result of that, we run into a lot of conflict between people who say, between supporting the rights and due process rights and the equal protection of the laws and the more expansive civil rights protections that we provide to a number of people, and rules in a certain number of areas, like, for example, reproductive freedom, abortion rights, things like that, come in conflict with other people's deeply felt religious values. And as a result of that, with the challenge that's been going on in the courts in the United States over the past few years has been aimed at validating religious freedom of people who are opposed to the exercise of these rights. And so the notion is that people are being oppressed from being able to express their religious beliefs that, for example, that reject my gender identity or any number of other things. And so they do not feel like it's appropriate for the government to compel them to, for example, treat me like a woman. And so, these, now, this might not have seemed like a viable approach not that long ago, but it's something that has gained a great deal of traction with the court system now in the federal courts in the United States, and is and I think is where we see the battleground being fought in the United States Supreme Court. For example, in a recent term, there was a case dealing with whether the Roman Catholic Church's contracts to provide foster parents for children, and the fact that they would not serve LGBT people, and the court sort of ducked that on a technical issue. But this is the sort of thing that we're seeing more and more come up. Questions about whether or not providing, for example, healthcare for transgender people, is that if you believe that that's contrary to your religious beliefs, is that an infringement on the medical provider's rights to express their religion, to deny by forcing them to provide you with care? And so these are the kind of issues that we're seeing pop up in our court system a lot these days. And I have an article that is awaiting publication in one of the American Bar Association's magazines, Human Rights Magazine, on this topic of religious rights and beliefs being in conflict with transgender rights, for example. And this is, I think, where the battleground is being drawn. And you see it both explicitly and implicitly in the dialogue and the discussion around many of these issues. And so, that answer your question, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a follow-up.
Sure.
So when it comes to the politics of gender and sexuality, and especially about things related to LGBTQ people, maybe I should preface that. So I think you talk a lot. Your answer actually talks a lot about the changes and the different perspectives within the American public in terms of public opinion, right? You have people who are convinced that it is their religious right to not to provide a wedding cake to a wedding of a gay couple, and on the other hand, there's people who are convinced that gay people should be allowed to marry and get equal treatment under law. Sorry, and the American public has changed. I mean, if you look at public opinion, putting the court aside for a sec, if you look at public opinion, the change in that respect has been almost unprecedented. I mean, if you look at the support in public opinion, both at the level of the masses and at the level of elites, President Obama is being elected in 2008, saying that he's opposed to gay marriage. By the time he's done, he's in favor, just like about a shift from 40% of the public who was in favor to when he started to 60% of the public who was in favor by the time he was done. So to what extent do you think, and America is a democracy, and the understanding not just of politics but also the understanding of constitutional rights has a lot to do with what people think, right? I mean, people thought that it was just to have separate but equal standards between the end of the 20th century and by the time Brown was decided. And then once, Brown was decided, and then maybe later on, the understanding of the American public was that, equality means something else. You cannot have separate schools and say that students get equal treatment under law. So in the context in the very delicate context that you're talking about, because it's very delicate, right? people's religious beliefs are a very delicate issue, and people's right to live their life according to their identity is a very delicate issue. And these are two, it's a complicated topic. I mean, I think you described it very well. I mean, there's no easy way, there's no easy solution here. But to what extent do you think the fact that the public opinion changed so dramatically in the direction of at least certain aspects, right? I mean, gay marriage by now is widely accepted in America. Over 60% of the public supports that. To what extent do you think this would influence, or this would be a constraint on those justices on the court that you mentioned who are willing to positively consider overruling precedent? To what extent is that a constraint on them? Are they attentive to what's happening in public opinion, given that it's a democracy, or is it more of an iron a tower that is disconnected from society?
They are indeed, I think, to some extent aware of public sentiment. I think that in general, the Supreme Court in the United States never really tends to be that far ahead of the public. And that's one of the reasons why it moves slowly. But what I think that many people are concerned about, well, first of all, when it comes to public opinion of lesbian and gay people has improved remarkably. Belief in things like marriage rights and even adoption rights, things like that. I think people are very open now in ways that they weren't even a few years ago. I never could have imagined how much the change was and how quickly it changed. In the United States, we went from a point where looking back 20 years ago, the concept of a civil union was considered radical. It was beyond people's imagination that you could do civil unions. And then within a couple of years, that became the fallback position of conservatives was, well, can't we just give you civil unions? And so the change in public sentiment was very quick, which, by the way, scares some of us because, when public opinion changes so quickly, one can always worry that public opinion could change again the other way. But I don't know the public acceptance of transgender people is anywhere near the same level. And so for the people in the trans community, I think that many of the politicians are very in the United States are very supportive. This government, for example, is very supportive of transgender rights. The Obama administration was, the Biden administration were very supportive of transgender rights. And a lot of places, a lot of people are not there. And so, but with regard to even things like abortion and things like that, even though I'd say that a majority of people in the United States support reproductive freedom rights, the way the court is dealing with it is to sort of duck the issue as a federalism issue. And so what happens is individual states will do something and the court will say, shouldn't we let the states decide? We're not telling you can't get an abortion. We're just saying your state can. And so that's, I think, one way that some of them will try to avoid this question is just to say, we're not saying that, we're not outlawing abortion. We're just not striking down the laws in states that did limit abortion rights. And so, and they'll say, well, 15 weeks, 14 weeks, 13 weeks, it's all up to the individual states to figure out how they're going to deal with it. And this is a very popular position on certain kind of issues with a large part of the, I'd say the conservative intellectual community is, let the states decide. This notion, these are 50 laboratories, and let them each try their own thing, and then, you know, we'll all learn from it, and each different area will do what it thinks is best for its people. Because in the United States, it's kind of strange. We are a country, but we are a confederation of 50 individual states, and depending upon who benefits from that, people either remember that or don't. Either they're all in favor of a strong federal government when it's to enforce what they want, and then when it's not, or when the administration isn't to their liking, and suddenly everybody's like, well, let the states do their own thing. And so that's, I think, how that will play out here, and that would be the concern. Is they're not going to just say no. Maybe they will. I mean, I shouldn't say never. I never thought that, you know, troops would march into Ukraine either, in the numbers that they did. But, you know, it happened. I never thought I'd be able to get married when I did. I did. And so, because I'm married to a woman. And so, you know, all sorts of things happen these days that one never expected or thought possible. But I think that the court will try to find a way to make it sound like they're not overturning precedent, like they're not disregarding what everybody wants. They'll find a way to just deflect it. That's my guess. They're very bright people, and I think that they'll know how to do that. They'll find a way to do it.
Fantastic. Very interesting. So, Judge, why don't we now move from the big picture of Supreme Court and precedent and potential effect of public opinion, maybe to your work a little bit. So, in our conversation last week, you said that you had some very interesting experience with various types of cases, and you mentioned eviction cases in particular. And I think it would be fascinating for everybody listening to hear about your perspective, and especially, if you can bring us into your mind and the way, you perceive the case and the kind of the decision-making process that goes through this, to the extent that you can do that. I guess something is still secretive, but, as much as you can tell us.
No, I mean, I'd be happy to talk about that. And it sort of leads into some of the things that we may be talking about later. So I am right now responsible for our eviction court, and our county has a residential eviction moratorium that has certain exceptions, and that includes health and safety. Of course, what constitutes a health and safety violation is a matter of some dispute, and we try to even with this, there's still dozens of cases going on with people who are being evicted from their homes. And there are a lot of other areas where, you see, because the truth of the matter is, for most judges, I have been in assignments where I've dealt with big issues and big, important policy issues and things. But the truth of the matter is that most of the day-to-day work of judges has to deal with things like being in a criminal assignment, or, dealing with, and for example, I've been in criminal assignments, and you have to make decisions sometimes. You have to make sometimes hard decisions. Should this person who's in custody be released? And under what terms? Under what conditions? I had, for example, at one point, I did a calendar where I was responsible for sealing people's records, criminal records. So now this is a big issue for many people because having the convictions on their record prevent them from getting jobs and, sometimes housing and things like that. But on the other hand, and so many people are and we here are very open and supportive of sealing these records. But sometimes you get somebody coming in and they say, I can't get a job as a night watchman because of all my burglary convictions. Or, I can't get a job as a cashier because of my embezzlement convictions. And it's like, maybe there's a public interest in people knowing this about your history, because, what will happen later if you do the same thing again? And it's like, well, why do you hide this information from us when you knew? And so so very often we have to balance decisions about what's in the public's interest, what's important for public safety and for the public good, and dealing with individual people, and to look to make sure that that rights are protected and things like that. One thing, an example of something that I'm dealing with right now, when I say right now, I mean at this moment, is that I am what we call the duty judge this week. I am sitting here, and if somebody needs a search warrant late at night, they will contact me electronically and say, and they will submit an application for me to issue a search warrant. I have to review this and see whether or not the police have shown that there's that it meets the standard to do this, because we don't want police just going in and getting, searching things just because they feel like it. And so we serve as a protection against that. And so with a lot of these things, you're looking at how there's a balancing of interests. And I keep talking about that because that's really a lot of what goes on with regard to the courts. Because courts are where we resolve our conflicts. People do not come to the court for the most part because everybody is happy and they want to tell us how great things are going. They come to us because there are disputes and there are challenges that have to be dealt with. And the law only goes so far in explaining what to do. If this were something that was automatic, if there was if this was just like something that you could put into a computer, if you had a flow chart and said if this, then that, we would have computers doing this. But we have people doing it, and we have people doing that because we understand and we have to use our judgment in terms of what's good or what's not good, and what's real and what's not real, to understand human nature, and to know when somebody's talking to us and they say, oh, give me another chance. Some people won't. And some judges won't, some do. And I'm probably more generous that way than some people. But if somebody comes along and they have a drug addiction and I can get them into a drug treatment program rather than have them in jail, I will do that. And so this is the sort of things that we have to figure out, where there's some people who just think, well, the only way they're ever going to do that is, some people think there are people, believe it or not, judges who believe that incarcerating people is good. It changes them. It makes them think, and they'll think twice about things. I don't believe that, but, and so we bring with us and this is going to sort of segue into I think what we're going to talk about next. We bring with us into our decision-making process our understanding of human nature, our understanding of what our values are and what the community's values are, because because it is, again, challenging, because as I said earlier, you want a certain amount of stability. You want people to know that if they do X thing, then the Y is going to be the outcome. And so you don't want to just say, oh, well, everybody, or, oops, try it again. But on the other hand, learning how to exercise reason and compassion and judgment requires, I think, that human element. And so and so I have to make decisions sometimes about, for example, with the housing matters. We're very fortunate here because we have received money to pay for attorneys to represent poor people who can't hire an attorney. And that helps immensely. But, you know, the tenant attorney always wants more time, and the landlords want them out right now. And each of them will come and make really good arguments for why, you know, we should move quicker or slower. And it's up to me to manage that and to figure out, you know, what is reasonable, what isn't. I have to ensure that everybody gets their rights protected. The rights of the landlord, the rights of the tenants, the right to a fair process. The key thing, I think, for judges in our system is ensuring access to the system and making sure that the system, that everybody has their rights protected, that they can have their day in court, and they can have it on a fair playing field. And then beyond that, I can't guarantee anything other than, I can't guarantee outcomes, but I can do my best to try to guarantee fairness, that everybody gets treated with respect and dignity, and that they get to follow, that the rules aren't only enforced for one group of people and not for another.
So that's fascinating. And before I move to the question that I was planning to ask you, I have another quick follow-up. So you mentioned the human element, and there is a lot of talk, not just in the world of law and judgment, but in various, you know, almost any field of human behavior now, about the trend towards artificial intelligence, right? Let machines make decisions. I mean, the president of Tel Aviv University published last year a book about, he's a law school professor, he's a law professor, a former dean of the law school here. And the book is published with an economist, I believe, and they discuss the potential and the dangers and, you know, the use of artificial intelligence in the world of judging. Now that sounds maybe very efficient on the one hand, maybe objective, but also if you talk about the human element, maybe even scary. So to some people. So any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm not sure, you know, it's a broad question, but
and that comes up, for example, I'll give you an example of how that actually comes up right now with the things I'm talking about. We use in making a determination about whether or not, of what kind, I said earlier that we look at somebody who gets incarcerated, who gets arrested because they were accused of committing a crime. And then when we release them, we might put certain terms and conditions on them, like that they need to check in with a probation officer, or they may need to have an electronic monitor, or they may have to have, sometimes those can actually detect whether or not somebody has been using drugs or alcohol. You can have a device put into a car so that you can't, then in order to get it started, you have to blow into it and not have alcohol on your breath. They call that an ignition interlock device. And so they have these various conditions, but the question is, so how do you decide what to do with this? And how do you decide who to do this or not? And one of the things that we are using as a test in our county, but most of our counties here in California use some form of this and other, is we use a tool. It's a questionnaire, and it's only assigns points. You know, are you unemployed? You know, is the person unemployed? Do they have a history with drugs? How many arrest convictions? How many times have they failed to appear at trial? And based upon this, they rank the risk level of a person, and statistically, And then they give percentage likelihoods that they'll fail to appear or that they'll recommit the crime based upon the answers to these questionnaires. And so they interview the person in the jail and they tell us this, and then we're like, okay, this is what they said, this is what the program says. And the one we use is very transparent. There's one that's more popular, but it's a black box. We don't know what goes into it. The company that has it is proprietary. And so people fill in a questionnaire, and the questionnaire will say how likely a person is to reoffend, how, whether or not they should be released back into society and under what terms, how much bail should be put in place, should they be on some sort of monitor. And the problem with that is, the reason we didn't want to use that in our county was because we don't know, it's a black box. We don't know where that comes from. And they'll say, well, it's based upon, studies, based upon prior convictions and things like that. But here's the problem. The problem is that if you're dealing with a system that's been unfair, that might, disadvantage some people over others, then, and if you're saying we're basing this upon past experience with other people, then you're skewing your data. It's not neutral. The problem with using data and analytics is that you're assuming that what's going into it's neutral. And then what happens is that people tend to assume, oh, a computer says this. It must be, it's impartial. It's a computer. It doesn't have any biases. Well, it has the biases of the people who programmed it, and it has the biases of the people who gathered the data that goes into it that makes the evaluations. And so the problem is that if you don't do that transparently, then you're going to have people, then you're basically working against an anonymous, mysterious machine that just decides your fate, and you have no idea why. And that company with that had that program, they also, as part of their contract, wanted people to be, they wanted reports of the individual judges about whether they followed their recommendations or not. And so, and because they were wanting to use that in a way to say that those judges were not being appropriate. They wanted to use it to sort of, guilt or shame the judges into following what the computer said. And that's a very dangerous road to go down, because at least when you're dealing with people, you can talk to them and maybe reason with them, or you can see something, or you can ask or something. When there's no transparency in how a system works or how decisions are being made, that's when there's a possibility, when injustice has greater opportunity of appearing, when authoritarianism has a greater opportunity of taking over. And so that's could be as political a speech as I'm going to give today, probably.
Very, very, very interesting. And that's, an interesting, I guess, view into the future, because the future probably holds this for many countries, certainly in America, in the US, the use of those technologies.
Because one of the goals here that people have is to try to take out human bias. But the problem is that you have to be really careful, because you may be taking the human bias and merely hiding it. And
the algorithm, you feed the algorithm with the bias, maybe, without wanting to do that. But that's the end. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so now we'll go back to plan. Okay. So most judges, I think, would argue that that identity doesn't matter, identity shouldn't matter, but there are exceptions. So I guess the one that many of us are familiar with is Sonia Sotomayor mentioning in a talk at UC Berkeley before she was appointed Supreme Court Justice that she, as a wise Latina, looks at things differently and may exercise. I don't remember the exact quote, but that might influence her work as a judge. She probably came to regret it during the confirmation hearings, where she got a lot of heat from some Republican senators. But that's a fascinating issue, right? And I think it's particularly interesting to hear your opinion on that. So, what do you think about identity? Does it matter? Does it influence you, the way you do your work, and in what ways? If you can share your experience with that.
It does matter, and for a number of reasons. One thing I would say is that anybody who believes that they're unbiased, who really believes that they're unbiased and completely unbiased, is totally unaware of their biases. Because we all have them. We all have, based upon our experiences and our perceptions, we view the world differently than other people. One of the things that we do a lot of focusing and training on here in California with our judiciary is what we call implicit bias, which is, that we have biases we don't even think about. We may look at somebody and make a decision about them based upon the color of their skin, or some other factor, and we don't even realize that it's instinctive almost. And the only way we can't not have some bias. What we need to be able to do is to identify our biases and to try to correct for them, so that if we know that we may treat some people better than others, we need to be sensitive to that. And we need to stop and think, am I being fair? Is this how I would treat somebody who was different? Would I be treating a man differently than a woman? Or would I be treating a person of one race differently than another, or a person of one religion than another? And so the only way that you can move past that is to be aware of the fact that it exists. And so we all come in with our own experiences, our own perceptions. And I have to say that Justice Sotomayor talked about being a wise Latina. It's like, don't we want wise people making these decisions? And if so, where does wisdom come from? Wisdom comes from experience. Wisdom comes from from life. Wisdom comes from going through life and having experiences, variety of experiences. Some of them bad. I mean, if you go through your entire life and everything is perfect and you never had anything go wrong, I think that you would not be able to understand the experiences of people who don't share that. And so, when you want to develop patience, wisdom. And when you want wisdom, it takes patience to develop that, and that was awful. I made a real bad mistake as a kid, which was I decided, I had heard that that King Solomon had wanted wisdom, had prayed for wisdom, and I prayed for wisdom, and oh goodness gracious, that's an awful thing to ask for, because you only get it by living through a life that can be challenging, and so. This is, and so the truth is, we are all, I think, influenced by our background. One thing that being different has meant to me is this has helped me to be more empathetic, to be more compassionate towards people who are different than everybody else, because I know what that experience is like, and not the same way they experience it, but opens a part of me up to be able to experience and understand the human condition in ways that some other people might not be able to. There are things that I lack in my own experience that I wish I had. I've never been a parent. I do wish that I had gone through that experience because I think that that's an important one. But, you know, I have a lot of other experiences. And one of the things that I think that's important for the judges is that we have people with different experiences so that we can, you know, we talk to each other more than one might think. When we have questions, we consult with each other and we try to get input from each other. And we also, you know, go to each other, and we can't complain to people in the public about everything, but we can talk with each other. We tell stories about what we've gone through, and we learn from each other. And that experience and seeing things from different people's perspectives through sharing as a community of people in this profession, I think is really valuable. And I think that it enriches the decision-making process for all of us.
So to you, I guess a major element as a person was being a trans person, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, about how it influenced your, I mean, I talked about your bio earlier, so we know the highlights, but if you could tell us a little bit of how it felt from the inside and how it you felt that it influenced you or maybe still does.
Sure. Now, I do want to also say one other thing before I get into that, which is that I'm also, my experience is also informed by the fact that I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And some of my, I mean, I have colleagues whose parents were judges, and that's what they always, you know, that's their world. I come from a different world. I come from people, my late father worked his entire career in a factory. He wasn't a lawyer or an accountant or business person. He worked with his hands, and that's a different kind of experience. But for me, you know, being trans, there's a lot of I think societal pressure to conform, and it's very easy to follow along with the way everybody else thinks and acts if you fit in with the crowd. But if you don't fit in with the crowd, which I didn't, then that wasn't available to me. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't be a conservative Republican because they wouldn't have me. And so there are things about the decisions I've made along my way that have been just, I mean, I had access to many jobs blocked because people didn't want to work with a trans person. And so, and they would find out, and they would not hire me for that reason. And I know they haven't, because I worked with recruiters who told me that they were told that they wouldn't work with me because I was trans. And so, and this isn't just in the ancient history of when I was younger. This is still the case with a lot of people now. Even now, even a few years ago, before I became a judge 12 years ago, there were still people who wouldn't give me the time of day because I was trans. Now they will, because I have a fancy title. But I mean, I have no illusions about the fact that when I retire from this job, there are a lot of people who are, you know, not going to laugh at my jokes anymore and not going to want me around. And so that's part of the reality of it. And so it helped me to understand what it's like to be denied opportunities just because of who you are, how you look. It helps me to be more understanding of people who aren't like me, because I know that, because I know what it feels like to be different. And that affects me on all sorts of, I wish I could just say, well, this one decision I would have made completely differently. I don't know that. But what I do know is that my life journey would have been completely different. And I can't say that I would have wound up as the person I am now. And I think that there's this belief that somehow putting on the robe makes you something different. And I was just talking with some of my clerks at the court the other day about this. There are some of my colleagues, the minute they put on the robe, they're a different person. And it's like, I'm not wired that way. I'm me, and I'm transparently me. And I think that in some ways, this experience has made me has led me to being transparently me, because I had nobody, when I was growing up, I had nobody to look to. I had no role models. I had no information. There was nothing available, and there was nobody first. That's the problem with being a trailblazer. And I've been called a trailblazer. So I have so many of these things that are on this picture behind me are awards for being a trailblazer. And trailblazer means you're the first one through. It's hard. And sometimes I would say that my being a trailblazer was because I was just too stupid to realize I couldn't do something, so I just kept doing it until I did. But that experience of that made me part of who I am. The fact that, you know, I wanted there to be other people who would look and see what I did and hear what I say, and would find some inspiration from that. And it has led some people to follow in my footsteps, and that's been great. That's part of what being trans has done for me. Now and because of the fact that I'm so closely associated with the LGBT community and with non-binary people, I know that the categories that we create for people, the boxes we put people in, they're all nonsense, and they're fake. They have some value. They have some meaning. There are some things. I mean, I wouldn't say that I was, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a woman if I thought that word was meaningless. And so, but I think that understanding and being exposed and being part of a community that values a difference and different ways of expressing themselves has helped me to be understanding of other people and how they express themselves. I don't know how much that actually relates to being a judge. I think it relates to who I am as a person, and who I am as a person is who I brought to being a judge. And so, and I was elected to this position by the people of my county, and they did so. I think most of the people who made all the endorsements that, you know, I had many groups that were behind me and organizations and things, and they did it because they wanted me, because they knew me as a person, and they wanted somebody like me making these kind of decisions in people's lives. And so, and I think that I got that from the journey I'm on, and part of that journey that I'm on is from being trans. And then if I hadn't been, I might have been some boring cisgender straight person that and I would have followed what my family would have expected of me, and I probably would have been on a completely different trajectory in life. And it's okay to be those things. It's okay to be straight. It's okay to be cisgender. I'm not saying that. It just wouldn't be good for me. Or maybe it would. I mean, in some way, I'd love to try it. I'd love to go back and try this over again the other way and see if what I'm just said holds up. but that's not an option.
The road not taken.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing this from such a personal perspective. That's very touching.
Okay.
Okay, so I took hopefully I didn't overstay my welcome, but I asked even more questions than I was planning. But I think if that's okay, Judge, if we can open it now for the public, or do you still want to say something? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm just saying I'm happy to keep talking, as you can probably guess.
So I think if we can open it to students now to ask, we have students and we have some faculty members also signed in through Zoom. So yeah, guys. So questions here. Yeah, go ahead.
Judge Kolakowski, thank you for coming to speak with us today.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, you briefly touched on pretrial detainment. And pretrial detainment is, depending on what state you're sitting in, can be a very difficult and pressing issue. I wanted to hear your opinion on pretrial detainment, especially when it comes to people who have committed a more violent crime, most of the time, at least from what I've seen recently, involving firearms, where sometimes you'll see judges set the bail very low, and then you'll see judges set the bail almost at an impossible sum of money. As a California judge, if you can even touch on it, I would like to hear your opinion on the matter.
Okay, I'll tell you, I'm not sure I can give an opinion. I think I can give you some observations. That it's a challenging thing when you're faced with somebody who is in custody, who's been accused of a crime, a violent crime, and trying to figure out what to do, what to do with their custody status, because what happens is, I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm gonna let you in kind of on a secret, but don't quote me on this. I know you're recording it still, but just don't tell everybody this. But the truth of the matter is that judges know that when they make these decisions, they're sort of vouching on some level for the person. What they're saying is, I think that you can go out into the public and you're not going to kill somebody tomorrow. Because what will happen is, let's say that somebody's been accused of beating their wife, and you release them from custody, and they go out and they get a gun and they kill their wife and kids, and then everyone will blame the judge. Everyone, the media, the newspapers, the television, they'll blame the judge. Even if the district attorney said, okay, I'm fine with it, even though the defense attorney said whatever, they're going to blame the judge. And we don't make the decisions with that, but it's something that I think that, it's there. And you have to be willing to make that decision and say, I believe enough that I trust my judgment enough that I know this guy's not going to go out there and kill somebody. And then you cross your fingers and you just hope. But you don't let it stop you from doing what you think is right just because you're worried that somebody's going to do something wrong, because you can't be a coward in this job that way. You can't just say, oh, well, the easiest thing then for everybody would be to say, oh, lock them all up and just, but you can't do that. But this is why these things have to be done intentionally, like I was saying, because you have to be willing to stop and say, am I doing this because this is what I think is right? Or am I doing this because this is what I'm afraid? And then you put your fear behind you and then you make the decision you think is right. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so, but this is a very big issue. And with COVID, we were releasing many people from our jails because they were, little incubators for transmission of a disease. And we were having people, it was spreading in prison and jail communities like wildfire. And so we released many nonviolent folk out into the world. And we also discovered that many of them didn't show up back to court when we told them to. And some of them reoffended. Is that universal? Is that more than normal? I don't know. I don't know that anybody's done real studies on this. Some people contend that that's resulted in more crime because you keep releasing criminals and they know that they're not going to be held accountable. Is that true? I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, so I see there's a couple of people with their hands up. I don't want to deny them. And so,
Judge, do you want to ask them? You want to be the judge and let them speak in turn, or do you want me to be the professor and let them speak in turn? Which one do
you know the folks so that you don't? One of the things, by the way, as a judge, is that you often confronted with people with names you do not know how to pronounce, and so I always try my best and to do it phonetically. And yes, is that Ido or?
Hi.
Ido or?
Yeah,
Ido?
hi, Judge. My name is Ido.
Ido.
Yeah, I'm an assistant professor at Tel Aviv University. I'm a trans person myself, and I'm an ex-lawyer. And I know the burden of being a trailblazer is not always a good thing for your career or personal life, but also very important. So thank you for your work throughout the years. I want to ask you something about what's going on in the US with, you were talking about the Supreme Court and things being unstable in their decisions to a certain extent. And so we've seen the Bostock decision on, trans non-discrimination and Gorsuch opinion there that I think is strong, valid, and very interesting way of looking at the question of anti-trans discrimination. But then we're seeing all this, but in Gorsuch, he declined on saying how this would apply to issues like affirmative healthcare or, segregated spaces in schools and otherwise. And then we're seeing all this state legislation, if not to say what's going on in Texas with, saying that affirmative care for children is child abuse. And so we're seeing this contradictory movements. And I was wondering from your perspective, how would these things be, best kind of like addressed in terms of like legal strategy? Is the right way you think would be to go forward all the way up to the Supreme Court and then hope that we're getting another, good day from the more conservative judges, or what are you seeing from your perspective of how to manage this really extremely contradictory kind of like legal movements?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that one of the things that has been going on is just that we have seen, as I mentioned, we have 50 states and the District of Columbia, which is not a state, but the 50 states, and many of them have been passing laws which are meant to limit or restrict the rights of transgender people, including especially transgender youth, in access to segregated facilities, programs, although some of them also to medical care. And one onerous situation in one state, which was something was stayed by the federal court, required that a bathroom that would be available to the public, if they were allowed to be used by a trans person of their gender identity, they would have to post a warning sign saying, warning, transgender people might be in here, or something like that. It actually had words that was, and spelling, the size of the warning and all, and the color. and that's been temporarily stayed by an injunction. But the question about what to do on a legislative basis, I mean, on a litigation basis nationally, I'm a little bit nervous because one of the things that happened is when it came to marriage, that was I dealt with for many years the large institutional LGBT civil rights organizations, and talked to the people and sometimes was part of litigation strategy meetings, and we were all like, oh no, goodness gracious, this is gonna be terrible, you know, and this is just we're not getting, no, don't want to risk it. And then, you know, other people came forward and brought litigation and was successful. And so I'm nervous to say, you know, back off and don't worry. Although I'll tell you that most of the people that I know who are legal practitioners in the United States, in the trans community that I've talked to, I think would be horrified about just about anything going up to the Supreme Court at this point. But one or two of them might not agree with that. And I know one of my friends who's a law professor now very strongly believed that Bostock would turn out as it did. And he predicted exactly why. And so it's complicated. And these are 9 individuals who make their decisions. It's not like voting party line on a piece of legislation. They're writing decisions. It's based upon reasoning. And, you know, anyway. So I don't know if that answers your so the question is, I probably don't know what the answer is, other than everybody's probably a bit scared, but also people are tired because everybody's fighting against all the state legislation going on. And it's because we're talking about over 100 bills every year being brought up around the country, and, you know, having to go through the legislative process, and it's hard.
Thank you.
And I'm honored to meet you. And so I think that next was it Lynn was next, I think?
Yeah, I believe so.
Hi. I first want to say thank you. This was very interesting and enlightening. My name is Lynn. I'm a student for political science and education. And I guess my question comes from that combination. So in the United States, your prisons are private owned, right? Like private companies and corporations and stuff like that. So I guess my main question is, what's the product? Is it the prisoners? Is it the final, like the people who comes back to the society? Is it just the facilities who allow the incarceration? And it also kind of reflects on, how do you look at the, like, how do you look at the prison itself? Is it just the getting people away from the society? Is it to make them kind of understanding, like becoming a better person and making some kind of a, I don't know, like a change in their life? That's my question, I guess.
And so let me just tell you that, first of all, in my county is very, I would say, politically progressive. And just so you know, but even despite that, there's some very odd things about us. We have our county owns the jail, and the government owns the jail and operates it, although we contract out for certain things like healthcare services. And our jail in this very, very progressive, very liberal area is one of the largest county jails in our country. And so why we have a jail the size of a prison, I don't know, but we do. And so it's very easy for us here in our county to lock people up because we can. There's some people, right now there's an election going on for our district attorney. and the prosecutor. And that's a big issue now, is over, you know, what is the goal of the criminal justice system, and do people support progressive reforms? Because we'll have a better idea about what the people in my county think after we see the outcome of that election. But the truth of the matter is that I have my own opinions about this that are probably and not everybody would agree with me. I think to some extent we want to, I mean, everybody says they want to rehabilitate people, and we try to do our best with that. But the truth of the matter is that I think that we deal with our prison system is the way we deal with, we take our problems and we warehouse them. And one of the things that is tragic about our system, and this was true a couple of years ago, and I bet it hasn't changed much since this time I saw these statistics about 5 years ago, when I saw the most recent statistics that I had. But at that time, about 5 years ago, there was no county in our country where there were more beds in a mental health facility available than there were jail cells. And so what we've done is we've criminalized mental health problems in the United States to a large extent. And most of our jails are filled with people with mental health problems and substance abuse problems that should be getting treatment and help, and instead are being often warehoused. And the way that we get people even into mental health programs is somebody commits an offense, we arrest them, then we refer them on to a mental health facility. And that is something that I think is tragic. But that seems to be the way that a lot of people I know say that this is bad and it shouldn't be that way, but I don't see a lot of real positive discussion about how to change that. I mean, I worked on dealing with things like drug treatment programs and diversion programs and mental health programs and things like that for people incarcerated. But it's not, that is, I think, where the tragedy of our system is here in this country, is that maybe half the people in our jails on a local level are there because they have drug, alcohol, or mental health problems, and that's why they're there. And they need treatment. And putting them in a cell is not giving them treatment.
Do you have any nonprofits who are also involved in this, or do you not even allow these kind of things, connections?
It's a huge problem, though, and this is the problem. This is the thing. It's society would have to be willing to devote the resources to provide for treatment and rehabilitation. And honestly, it's expensive and it's time consuming. And we don't all agree on how that, even the people who try to do this, what's the best and most effective things. Wow, we sort of went on an interesting, this is a topic that I can talk about, although I know as we sort of, you know, they're like LGBT. No, I'm not going to talk about the problems with our system, but there's a lot of people, there are a lot of people trying to do good things. For example, we in our county have a justice-involved mental health advisory committee of representatives from agencies, from nonprofits, NGOs, from police departments, from the county, from the courts, working on trying to find ways to make the system work better. But it's a very big challenge. And I don't want to deprive Noya of getting to have a question. Although I don't know how long we're supposed to. Thank you very much. I don't want to keep you forever either.
Judge, I know it's getting close to 1 a.m. for you. So maybe we'll let Noya ask the final question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for talking to us. I'll promise I'll be quick with my question. You talked about it earlier a bit about how with abortions, though there is a Supreme Court ruling, the states are allowed to make decisions for themselves, and how we've seen in Texas, and I saw an article earlier today about how in Missouri there's also leading a new law that will stop women who want to pass the state border to have abortions in this next state. I wanted to know what the limit of when is it a state problem, and when the Supreme Court or higher ups should be involved in this, as this is now causing women to take very dangerous steps in order to have their abortions, or which, you know, even for the 6 weeks in Texas, and that these are unwanted pregnancies, and how they will do whatever it takes to end them, even if it's dangerous to them.
Absolutely. Now I do want to point out, and I'm not saying this is my my caveating and my both sidesism, but you know, the truth of the matter is that for many of the people who are what they call themselves pro-life, they mean it as pro-life. They believe that abortion is murder, and so they believe that they're stopping infanticide, and so they're quite zealous in their belief that they need to stop this because they believe that we're engaging in mass slaughter of children. I don't see things that way, but that's their belief. The question is, when should the state decide, and when should the federal government decide? And in the past, the federal government's taken a pretty big role in it. But the problem now is that the majority of the justices, well, I have to see how they're actually going to rule, because, you know, we can say they're conservative and they can say what they prefer, but sometimes their decisions, when they write them, may not reflect their preference, but rather their belief of what the law requires. And so we can't always assume that just because somebody opposes abortion that they're going to say, they're going to sign on to overturning Roe v. Wade or whatever it is that people are afraid of, because it's not like I said, a straight up down vote. It's not like a legislature where there's a bill that appears in front of you and you go yay or nay. And so, but the truth is that there are many people on the court who believe in their heart that abortion is wrong and they would like to see it illegal. And the easiest way for the easiest way for them to do that would be to say, states, do your thing. And what they're saying is this is not inconsistent. They're not outlawing abortion. They're merely restricting it. They're merely placing limitations, reasonable limitations, they might say. And so where do you draw the line? First trimester, second trimester, how many weeks? How many? It's like, that's a public, that's a policy issue then. If you say, if you believe that there's a spot between where you can put limitations between conception and birth, if you believe there's some spot in the middle there where you can limit things, at that point the court may feel comfortable just saying, you know, let the Congress decide, let the legislature decide. That's a policy issue. That's not a judicial issue. That's a policy issue. And so there's a strong belief, I think, in our country, in the United States, among people certainly on the more liberal side of things, that they believe that the courts are the ultimate protector of things and will step in whenever there's an injustice. And there are people on the conservative side who believes, you know, we got a legislature, and that's, you know, they're supposed to be doing the policy stuff. And So the truth is, like I said, a couple of years ago, it would have been inconceivable that, you know, states would be doing some of these laws, and the Supreme Court would be like, okay, or wouldn't immediately like stay them and things like that. And so we just don't know. We're entering a new era. We're entering a new time for the court, and I don't know that we really know yet how that's going to turn out, especially with the newer justices. And so I don't know, for example, with Amy Coney Barrett was somebody that when she first came in, I think she was a little bit more cautious because she didn't have her clerks in place. She came in the middle of a term. You know, now she's established, she's getting her, you know, her footing, and we may see more from her about what she really thinks about things. We don't know what the new justice is going to be like, and we don't know to what extent they're going to be able to influence each other. And I'm an optimist. I'm an optimistic realist. I don't know. I mean, I hope for the best, but you know that life is not always turn out the way we want. And so, but it's good. We are facing an interesting times ahead, and I'm not quite sure where it's all going to go. But where should that line be drawn? I'm not on the Supreme Court. If I were on the Supreme Court, I'd be probably a bit more proactive about it, because I don't think that the states should be going around trying to find ways around Supreme Court jurisprudence. But that's me. I'm the president is never, no president has nominated me, nor has the Senate been asked to confirm me. So my opinions are just that of a, you know, that of a state judge, and you know, the federal people, they don't think much of us anyway. And so,
okay, Judge. So thank you so much. It was really a great experience. You mentioned at the beginning that you took some Hebrew classes at some point, and you decided not to say too much about it. So maybe we can. You taught us so much, but maybe we can teach you one word, which is shalom. And it's very useful because it's good for hello, it's good for goodbye, it's good for peace. So and hopefully we'll be able to maybe welcome you physically here in Israel at some point in the future. That's and then we can use shalom as often as we'd like. But
I would be very, very thrilled to be able to visit at some point. It would be my honor. I, by the way, put my personal email in the chat, and I did that because you can find me on Facebook. I'm, you know, no, I'm not on TikTok, you know, but because dancing judges probably wouldn't go over very well. That'd probably be sanctioned. But I offer this all the time, and you would think with as much as I offer it that it would be abused. It's not. If you see me on social media, send me a friend request. If you want to send an email to follow up with additional questions or something, please feel free. And because I make friends around the world by doing this sort of discussions, and I think that it enriches me as much as I hope it enriches all of you. To get different perspectives and to meet people from all over. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And hopefully you can get some rest now. I guess it's close to 1 a.m. So
yeah, but I just, believe it or not, did a search warrant while we were talking.
Okay.
a DUI warrant. And as my phone's been sitting here ringing, and I hope that she's noticed that I approved it, so she'll stop calling me. And so,
well, that's multitasking for sure.
You got to be multitasking in this modern age. That's the great thing about sitting at a computer is you can do that. And if I hadn't told you, you wouldn't even know.
Absolutely.
See, so I've been
Done
working.
it.
Anyway, thanks. It's been a pleasure.
It's
Shalom.
been a pleasure to us as well. So have a good night. Okay.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.